My name is Michael. I'm 52 years old, and not long ago, I woke up from a deep coma, only to discover that my wife and my mother-in-law had already divided my belongings, drained my accounts, and were just one signature away from disconnecting me from life support. They were celebrating my death before my body had even gone cold, but they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated my will to live and my ability to remember every single word they said beside my hospital bed, while they believed I was nothing more than a vegetable. There is nothing more dangerous than a man who has returned from the abyss with his eyes open and his heart turned to ice. I heard them planning their new life with my money, mocking my years of hard work, and my mother-in-law telling my wife that my accident was the best investment God had ever sent them. They wanted to bury me alive, but now I will be the one watching their worlds collapse piece by piece, without mercy and without turning back. If you enjoy stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, leave your like and subscribe. Here we share real stories of revenge and lessons that are never forgotten. For more than 20 years, I built what I believed was a fortress. My life was a monument to order and discipline. I was always a man of numbers, of logic, the kind who measures twice before cutting once. I dedicated myself to high-level financial consulting, moving pieces across boards most people can't even see. It gave me a good life, a house with high ceilings, cars that never fail, and a bank account that allowed me to sleep peacefully at night. But my greatest pride wasn't the money. It was my family. Or at least, that's what I believed. Emily came into my life when I was 30. She was young, vibrant, and seemed to possess the warmth that a cold, analytical man like me lacked. I married her convinced I was protecting something sacred. For 2 decades, she never lacked anything. Trips, jewelry, unlimited credit cards. I was the provider, the pillar, the man who solved every problem before she even noticed it existed. But where there is a spoiled wife, there is often a mother-in-law pulling the strings from the shadows. Patricia, Emily's mother, was always a constant presence in our home. A woman with rehearsed smiles and eyes that were always calculating the price of the furniture. At first I accepted it as part of the marriage package. I thought her closeness was maternal love, but over time I realized she saw our marriage not as a union, but as a business in which I was the primary asset. I supported both of them. I paid Patricia's debts, financed her luxuries, and gave her a seat at our table almost every night. My routine was strict. Wake up at 5, work 12 hours, come home to dinner served, and find them whispering conversations that stopped the moment I walked into the room. I never paid attention. I assumed it was women's talk, trivial secrets. Emotionally, I was a satisfied man, maybe a little tired from carrying the weight of being the sole financial engine behind the entire machine, but proud. I felt in control. I looked at myself in the mirror at 52 and saw a successful man, someone who had fulfilled his part of the social contract. The respect I commanded at work translated into a false sense of security at home. I didn't see the cracks because I was too busy polishing the facade. My relationship with Emily had become comfortable, or so I thought. There were no more grand passions, but there was a peace I valued above everything. She was my partner, the person who would hold my hand if the world collapsed. How wrong I was. The atmosphere in my home was opulent, yet sterile. Everything was in its place, selected by Patricia, who little by little had replaced my tastes with hers, under the excuse that Emily preferred a more modern style. I gave in. In my mind, arguing over the color of a rug or the brand of dinnerware was a waste of time for a man with my responsibilities. I gave them control of the surface, believing I still controlled the foundation. They learned my schedules, my weaknesses, and most importantly, they learned where I kept every important document. I was the architect of my own cage. I felt invincible, surrounded by a loyalty I had purchased with years of excessive generosity. There were no clear warning signs, only small gestures that today, with the clarity betrayal brings, I can recognize as preparation. Patricia convincing Emily to change the beneficiaries on certain insurance policies, just in case.
Emily asking a little too much about my access codes to corporate accounts,
Pretending to show a sudden interest in my finances for family security. I, in my arrogance as an intelligent man, gave them everything. I believed trust was the foundation of it all. I didn't know I was feeding the wolves who would devour me the moment I stumbled. My life was perfect, a Swiss watch running smoothly in a chaotic world. Until one rainy night, driving back from a late meeting, a truck with failed brakes decided my time of peace was over. The impact was dry, dark, and absolute. In 1 second, I went from owning the world to being a broken body trapped in twisted metal, sinking into a darkness that would last for months. What they didn't know was that even though my body shut down, my mind remained there, trapped, listening as they began dividing the remains of my life while I was still breathing.
I woke up in the dim light of a hospital room,
But not in the way people imagine. My eyes didn't open, my fingers didn't move, and my mouth couldn't release even a whisper. I was there, locked inside my own skull, listening to the steady beeping of the machines that kept me alive. At first I felt fear, but that fear turned into a cold fury when the voices of Emily and Patricia filled the silence of my room. They didn't come to pray for my recovery. They didn't come to whisper words of encouragement. They came to sign documents.
I heard the rustle of papers sliding across the bedside table.
Emily spoke in a tone I had never heard before. She was no longer the sweet wife, but an impatient woman, almost irritated by the delay of my death. Patricia, with that icy voice that now revealed her true nature, told her not to worry about remorse. "He's not here anymore, Emily. He's just flesh. We need to move fast before the company's lawyers start asking questions," my mother-in-law said. The sound of a pen scratching across paper felt like a knife to my chest. They were forging my signature on a power of attorney to transfer my properties to a corporation Patricia had created months before the accident.
The humiliation was complete. I listened as they talked about my belongings as if they were carrion.
Emily complained that my will gave too much control to a trust and not directly to her. Patricia assured her that with the medical diagnosis of persistent vegetative state, it would be easy to convince a judge that she needed full control to cover my care expenses. They laughed, a low, contained laugh, as they tried on the future they were stealing from me. Emily mentioned a man, a name I didn't recognize, someone she was already planning a trip to Europe with, using the funds from my retirement account. I felt a fire burning inside me, a rage that wanted to explode through my veins, but my body remained a statue.
One day, the doctor walked in.
Emily's tone instantly shifted to a fake sob, a performance worthy of an award. She asked how much longer I would have to suffer in that state. The doctor, in his professional voice, mentioned there was a minimal possibility of brain activity. The moment he left the room, Patricia snapped, "We can't wait for a minimal possibility. If he wakes up, we're finished. We need to talk to the lawyer about a do not resuscitate order and terminating life support." My own wife said nothing to defend me. There was a long silence, and then her answer. "Do what you have to do, Mom. I'm not spending the next 10 years being the nurse of a ghost."
That was my symbolic expulsion from humanity. To them, I was no longer a husband, no longer a son-in-law, no longer even a human being. I was a financial obstacle. In the following weeks, I watched, through my ears, as they dismantled my life. They sold my watch collection, emptied my safe, and began packing my books and clothes to donate. They left me alone in that room for days, only appearing when strictly necessary to maintain appearances with the hospital staff. I felt like discarded waste in a corner. The loss wasn't only material, it was the destruction of every memory, every sacrifice I made for them. They erased me before I was gone. The last time they stood together in that room before the miracle happened,
Patricia handed Emily divorce papers on the grounds of irreversible incapacity. They were going to leave me there with nothing, disconnected from the world and from legality, while they retired to enjoy the spoils. But my mind, fueled by that pure and rational hatred, began to find its way back. I was not going to die. Not for them. The day my fingers moved for the first time, I didn't tell anyone, not even the nurses. I knew that if Emily or Patricia suspected I was regaining consciousness, they would speed up the process of shutting me down. So I played their game. For weeks I pretended to remain in the darkness while my senses sharpened. Every time they came into the room to talk about their plans, I took mental notes. I recorded account names, transfer dates, and the name of the corrupt attorney Patricia was using to legitimize the forged documents. My recovery became a military secret. At night, beneath the sheets, I moved my limbs, exercising my atrophied muscles until the pain made me sweat. When the doctor finally noticed my improvement, I asked to speak with him alone. I strictly forbade him from informing my wife. I used my legal authority as a patient to revoke any power they had over my medical decisions. But that was only the beginning. I needed someone on my side, someone they couldn't buy. I called Julian, an old friend and attorney at my firm, who had always distrusted Patricia. When he walked into the room and saw my condition, but more importantly, the coldness in my eyes, he knew this would not be a friendly mediation. "Michael, they've already declared you dead," he said. "I know," I answered, my voice rough. "Now let's show them the dead can bite." My plan wasn't simply to recover my money. That would have been too easy. I wanted them to feel the same vulnerability I felt while trapped in that bed. Julian worked in the shadows. We discovered Patricia had made a technical mistake. In her rush to move the money into her shell corporation, she had left fingerprints on transfers that crossed delicate legal boundaries. She assumed I would never wake up to audit the accounts. It required patience. For 2 months, I returned home under the pretense of assisted recovery, faking a mental and physical weakness I no longer had. I sat in my armchair, staring blankly, letting them continue to speak in front of me, as if I were a piece of furniture. Emily even brought her new lover into the house, introducing him as a consultant, helping her manage the business. I watched them laugh in my face, drinking my most expensive whiskey while I remained motionless in the corner. What they didn't know was that my phone, hidden inside the lining of my wheelchair, was recording every confession, every mockery about the old idiot who had cleared their path. I didn't feel sadness, only mathematical satisfaction. Every insult became another piece of evidence. Every plan they outlined in front of me was another nail in their financial coffin. I prepared the counterattack with the precision of a surgeon. I knew exactly when the funds from my life insurance policy would hit the account they had redirected. That would be the moment to close the trap. The day of the trust reading and the supposed final transfer of my assets, the living room of my house looked like the stage of a restrained celebration. Emily wore a black dress, performing a premature mourning, while Patricia checked her watch with the impatience of someone waiting for a grand prize. Their attorney, a man with an oily smile, spread the documents across the mahogany table. I was there, seated in my wheelchair, a blanket over my legs and my gaze fixed on nothing. They treated me like an inconvenience that would soon be sent off to a low-cost care facility. "Michael, dear, we just need your thumbprint here, since your signature is still a little weak," Patricia said in a falsely sweet tone that turned my stomach. Emily didn't even look at me. She was busy sending text messages, probably to her lover. That was the moment I stood up. Slowly, without the slightest trace of the weakness I had pretended to have for months. The silence that fell over the room was so dense I could almost hear the rapid beating of their hearts. Emily's face turned grey, and the pen slipped from Patricia's fingers, rolling across the floor. "There won't be any need for a thumbprint, Patricia," I said in a clear, icy voice that made them step back. At that exact moment, The front door opened and Julian walked in, accompanied by 2 officers and a forensic auditor. The triumphant expression on my mother-in-law's face transformed into a mask of pure terror. I handed their attorney a blue folder. It wasn't transfer paperwork. It was a notice of a civil lawsuit and a criminal complaint for fraud, document forgery, and attempted homicide through negligence. I had recorded every conversation in the hospital, every plan to disconnect me, and every detail of the funds they diverted into Patricia's shell company. "You thought I was dead, but I was only listening," I told them, stepping closer to Emily, who had begun to tremble. "I heard about the trip to Europe. I heard about your lover in my own bed. And I heard how you planned to let me die for a few $1,000,000. Emily tried to stammer an apology, tried to cry, but her tears held no power over me. Patricia, always the criminal mastermind, tried to shout that it was all a misunderstanding, that they were doing it for my own good. But the forensic auditor had already frozen every account. The money they had moved illegally was no longer in their control. It had been returned to a protected account they would never access. The police informed them they had to leave the property immediately. I didn't allow them to take anything but the clothes they were wearing. Watching Patricia being escorted outside, screaming insults as she completely lost her composure, was one of the most satisfying sights of my life. Emily stood on the sidewalk, staring at the house that was no longer hers, realizing her lover would disappear the moment he learned she didn't have a single dollar left. I left them on the street, their accounts at zero, and a mountain of evidence against them that would keep them in court for the next 10 years. There were no screams from me, no explosions of anger, only the quiet pleasure of watching logic and justice dismantle their greed. After the door closed behind them, the silence that remained in the house was not the emptiness of loneliness, but the peace of absolute triumph. I stood for a long time in front of the window, watching the patrol car lights fade into the distance, carrying with them the remains of a life that had turned out to be a well-rehearsed farce. For months, while I was trapped in that hospital, I dreamed of this moment, but reality was far colder and far more satisfying than anything my imagination had projected. Justice, when executed with mathematical precision, does not need to be loud. Emily and Patricia went from opulence to absolute ruin in a matter of minutes. The legal process that followed was a massacre for them. Julian, my attorney, gave them no mercy. Not only did we recover every cent they tried to divert, but we countersued them for damages, using the recordings I obtained as a weapon of mass destruction against their reputation. Patricia, the woman who always boasted about her lineage and class, ended up living in a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town, spending what little she had left on lawyers who had already warned her there was no escape. Emily, for her part, learned the bitterest lesson of all. The love she believed she had found outside our marriage was as volatile as the money that fed it. The moment her consultant discovered the accounts were frozen and she was facing fraud charges, he vanished off the face of the earth. He didn't leave a trace, not even a note, a reminder that she was only desirable as long as she owned my checkbook. Many people ask me if I feel any kind of remorse. They look into my eyes expecting to see a spark of sadness or the desire for some cinematic reconciliation. They are wrong. At 52 years old, I have learned that forgiveness is a luxury granted to those who make mistakes, not to those who commit moral crimes with full awareness. They didn't make a mistake. They designed a plan to eliminate me. You cannot forgive someone who tried to disconnect your existence while you could still feel air in your lungs. My heart did not harden because of the accident. It hardened because of the truth. Today, when I walk through the halls of my company, people look at me differently. They know I am the man who returned from death to reclaim his throne. I am no longer the naive provider who delegated his happiness into the hands of others. Now I oversee every detail, every contract, every movement. I have rebuilt my life on far stronger foundations, selective distrust. My circle is now so small it barely fits within my own hands. I have learned to read people's silences, to observe their gestures when they think I am not looking. That is the true aftermath of my time in a coma. My ability to observe has become almost supernatural. Sometimes at night, I pour myself a whiskey and sit in the same armchair where they used to mock my vegetative state. I look at the walls that were once decorated according to Patricia's taste and now stand empty, waiting to be filled with something that truly belongs to me. There is no trace of them here. I had every piece of furniture they touched burned and every room repainted to erase their scent. The house now smells new, clean, free. The price I paid for this clarity was high. It almost cost me my life, but the result is worth every second of agony in that hospital bed. People often say life is short and that you should turn the page. I say life is long enough to watch your enemies collapse under their own weight. I didn't have to dirty my hands with violence. I only had to be patient and let their own greed do the dirty work. They built the rope that eventually hanged their own social and financial lives. I was simply the man who gave them the time to finish tying the knot. I've started traveling again, but now I do it alone or with partners who understand the value of professional loyalty. I am not searching for love or constant company. Solitude is a far more honest companion than a wife waiting for you to stop breathing so she can inherit your savings. I've learned that peace of mind has no price, but it does have a cost. The elimination of everything toxic and false. My life is now a perfect mechanism without noise, without leaks. My health has improved remarkably. Doctors say my recovery is a case study, but I know it wasn't medicine that put me back on my feet. It was the thirst for justice. Purpose is the best fuel for a broken body. Now that I am finished with them, the world looks different. There are no happy endings filled with hugs and tears. There are just endings sealed with closed accounts and firm sentences. My name, Michael, once again means something in the market and in life. I am no longer the victim of an accident. I am the architect of a total reconstruction. Looking back, the coma was the greatest gift I could have received. It was the necessary filter to separate gold from mud. If I had never had that accident, I would have died years later, old and tired, surrounded by two vultures who would have celebrated my funeral with champagne bought with my own money. Fate gave me the opportunity to attend my own wake and then rise from the coffin to see who was truly crying and who was measuring the size of the inheritance. I learned that loyalty is a concept most people cannot afford. Most are loyal only to their own convenience, and once you understand that, no one can hurt you again. I have settled my debts with the past. Nothing remains unresolved. The next time someone tries to underestimate a man who has been to the abyss, they should think twice. Because when you return from there, you don't bring flowers. You bring the detailed invoice of everything you are owed. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is watching life collect its debts. If this story felt as intense to you as it was for me to live it, leave your like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories.